The champagne glass shattered against the mahogany stable door, sending crystal shards flying across the perfectly polished floor. Alexander Xander Morgan, with his steel blue eyes narrowed in fury, glared at his trembling stable manager. "What? Do you mean no one can ride him?" Xander's voice was deceptively calm, but everyone within earshot knew that the calm preceded a storm. At 42, the self-made tech billionaire had built an empire through sheer will and ruthless determination. Failure wasn't in his vocabulary. "Sir, Midnight Thunder has thrown every professional rider we've brought in. The last Olympic champion lasted 8 seconds before breaking his collarbone." The stable manager, Jenkins, clutched his clipboard like a shield. Xander ran his hand through his salt and pepper hair, a habit from his younger, humbler days that betrayed his frustration. The Kentucky Derby was 3 months away, and his prized $14 million Arabian Stallion, the horse he'd acquired specifically to establish his Morgan equestrian brand, was proving to be completely unrideable. "Then find someone who can last 9 seconds, he said, his British accent becoming more pronounced in his anger. "I didn't build Morgan Tech from a garage in Boston to be defeated by a horse." As he turned to stride back to his waiting Bentley, his personal assistant, Charlotte, appeared at his side, her tablet already illuminated with potential solutions. "The Thompson stables called again," she said, keeping pace with his long strides. "They're interested in buying Midnight Thunder, offering $15 million. "I don't want to sell him," Xander snapped. "I want him tamed." Charlotte cleared her throat. "Well, there's an alternative. I've been researching lesser-known horse trainers, and there's a woman in Virginia who specializes in difficult cases. She's not famous, but locals swear she can communicate with horses. They call her the Horse Whisperer of Blue Ridge." Xander stopped walking. "A horse whisperer. Really, Charlotte? Next you'll suggest a psychic." "Her name is Emma Sullivan. No formal training, but she's turned around cases that professional trainers gave up on. She works at her family's small ranch and—" "No." Xander checked his Patek Philippe watch. "I have a board meeting in 2 hours. Find me someone with credentials, not fairy tales." The stable's wooden doors suddenly burst open, and a young stable hand rushed in, face flushed. "Mr. Morgan, Midnight Thunder broke through the paddock fence again. He's heading for the highway." Time seemed to slow as Xander processed the implications. His uninsurable $14 million investment was galloping toward a busy interstate. Within seconds, he was sprinting toward the commotion, his Italian leather shoes sinking into the mud as rain began to fall. By the time he reached the broken fence line, a small crowd had gathered near the road. To his surprise, they weren't panicking but watching something with fascination. Pushing through, Xander froze at the sight before him. A woman in worn jeans and a flannel shirt stood in the middle of the field, her back to him. Her auburn hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, and despite the light rain, she wore no jacket. And facing her, snorting but not charging, was Midnight Thunder. The horse that had thrown champion jockeys was standing still, ears pricked forward, as the woman slowly extended her hand. She was speaking in a voice too low for Xander to hear. "Who the hell is that?" he demanded of no one in particular. An older ranch hand whispered reverently, "That's Emma Sullivan. She was delivering feed to the neighboring farm when she saw your horse break out." Xander watched in disbelief as the stallion, his violent, unpredictable stallion, lowered his massive head and allowed this strange woman to place her palm against his muzzle. "Get her contact information," he murmured to Charlotte without taking his eyes off the scene. "Whatever she charges, double it." In that moment, watching this unknown woman tame what couldn't be tamed, Alexander Morgan felt something unfamiliar stir within him. Something that couldn't be measured in billions or acquisitions. Something dangerous. What he didn't know was that Emma Sullivan hated billionaires almost as much as she loved horses. And she was about to become his biggest challenge yet, Emma Sullivan had been refusing Alexander Morgan's calls for 3 days. "The man is relentless," she muttered to her younger sister Beth as she silenced her phone for the 5th time that morning. The small kitchen of their family ranch house smelled of fresh coffee and homemade bread. Outside the window, the blue Ridge Mountains loomed in the misty Virginia dawn. "You said he's offering how much?" Beth asked, her eyes widening as she fed her 4-year-old daughter Lily a spoonful of oatmeal. "Enough to fix the leaky roof, replace the tractor, and pay off Dad's medical bills," Emma admitted reluctantly. "But I've seen his type before. Men who think their money can buy anything, or anyone." Beth raised an eyebrow. "You judge him because he's rich? That sounds a lot like prejudice, Em." Emma flushed. Her sister had a point, but she wasn't ready to admit it. 6 years ago, Emma had been engaged to a wealthy businessman who'd seen her as little more than a rustic accessory to showcase at parties. "My charming country girl," he'd called her. The humiliation still stung. "His horse is beautiful," Emma said instead, changing the subject. "A once-in-a-lifetime animal. Midnight Thunder deserves better than to be a billionaire's trophy." The kitchen door swung open, and their father, Jim Sullivan, hobbled in on his cane. At 68, the former champion rodeo rider was battling arthritis and medical bills that threatened the family ranch. "Emma," he said, holding up the local newspaper. "Did you know there's a private helicopter landing at Miller's Field? The whole town's talking about it." Before Emma could respond, the sound of rotors filled the air, growing louder by the second. All 3 adults rushed to the window. A sleek black helicopter was indeed descending toward their neighbor's field, not half a mile away. "You don't think—" Beth began. Emma's phone rang again. The caller ID read A. Morgan. "Unbelievable," she muttered, but this time she answered. "Mr. Morgan, harassment is not the way to—" "Ms. Sullivan," came the crisp, British accent that had been haunting her voicemail. "Since you refused to come to New York, I've come to you. I believe that's my helicopter you're watching land." 20 minutes later, Emma stood in the barn, arms crossed defensively as Alexander Morgan ducked through the doorway. He looked absurdly out of place in his tailored charcoal suit and polished shoes, yet somehow commanding, like a wolf who'd wandered into a henhouse but wasn't hungry. Yet, "Your farm is—" He paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Quaint." "It's a working ranch, Mr. Morgan, not a petting zoo for billionaires," Emma retorted. "And I've already told your assistant I'm not interested." Xander studied her, taking in the stubborn set of her jaw, the intelligence in her green eyes, the way the sunlight through the barn slats highlighted the auburn in her hair. She wasn't what he'd expected. Most people became instantly accommodating when faced with his wealth and reputation. Her defiance was refreshing. "I've tripled my offer," he said simply. "It's not about the money. It's always about the money." Emma shook her head. "That horse doesn't need a trainer. He needs someone who understands him. And you need to understand that not everything in this world is for sale." Something in her words seemed to land differently than she intended. Instead of anger, a look of genuine curiosity crossed Xander's face. "What if I offered you something besides money?" he asked. "Like what?" Emma asked, suspicion evident in her tone. "A partnership. Help me understand Midnight Thunder. Teach me what you know." The words came out before he could stop them, surprising even himself. Alexander Morgan didn't ask for help. He hired expertise. "You want horse lessons?" Emma couldn't keep the incredulity from her voice. "I want to understand what you see that I don't," he admitted. "And in return, I'll fund whatever repairs your ranch needs." The offer hung between them like a tangible thing. Emma knew she should refuse. The devil always had the sweetest deals. But as she opened her mouth to decline, her father's cane tapped on the wooden floor behind her. "Emma, Jim Sullivan said quietly. At least hear the man out. She turned to see her father standing in the doorway, and beside him, to her shock, was Midnight Thunder himself, being led by one of Morgan's handlers. The magnificent black stallion pawed at the ground nervously, but his eyes were fixed on Emma. He wouldn't settle in the trailer, Xander explained, noticing her surprise. I had him transported separately. He's yours for 6 weeks. If you can train him, and me, I'll make it worth your while. If not, I'll never bother you again. Emma looked from the horse to the billionaire and back again. There was something else in Morgan's eyes now. A vulnerability she hadn't expected. A genuine passion for the animal that matched her own. 6 weeks, she said finally. But we do this my way. My ranch, my rules. A smile tugged at the corner of Xander's mouth. Not the practiced, camera-ready smile she'd seen in business magazines, but something smaller and more genuine. Deal, he said, extending his hand. When their palms met, neither was prepared for the jolt of electricity that passed between them. Emma quickly withdrew her hand, and Xander cleared his throat. I'll have my things sent from the helicopter, he stated, all business again. Your things? Emma echoed. Of course. If I'm learning about horses, I'll need to be here full time. His blue eyes gleamed with something that might have been mischief. I hope you have a guest room, Ms. Sullivan. I'm about to become your new boarder. Beth, who had been quietly watching from the barn door, burst into laughter. Oh, this is going to be better than those romantic comedies I watch. Both Emma and Xander turned to glare at her, then accidentally caught each other's eyes and quickly looked away. Midnight Thunder snorted, as if laughing at them both. Alexander Morgan had slept in 5-star hotels across the globe, in private villas on Mediterranean islands, and in his $40 million Manhattan penthouse with views of Central Park. But never, not once in his 42 years, had he slept on a mattress that creaked with every breath. Rise and shine, Mr. Billions, Emma's voice called through the door of the Sullivan Ranch's modest guest room, followed by 3 sharp knocks. It's 5 a.m. Horse training starts at sunrise, Xander groaned, and reached for his phone to check his emails, only to discover there was no signal. Right. Rural Virginia. He'd have to use the satellite connection from his helicopter later. When he finally made his way to the kitchen, he found the Sullivan family already finishing breakfast. Emma's father, Jim, nursed a cup of coffee while reading a worn paperback Western novel. Beth was packing a lunch for her daughter, Lily, who stared at Xander with unabashed curiosity. Are you really a billionaire? The little girl asked, her missing front tooth creating a whistle as she spoke. Lily, Beth admonished. It's all right, Xander said, finding himself smiling at the child's directness. Yes, I am. Then why don't you have a crown? Lily asked, clearly disappointed. Xander knelt to her level. That's kings and queens. Billionaires just have very fancy phones. He pulled out his latest model smartphone, which suddenly seemed far less impressive in the face of a 4-year-old's disappointment. There's coffee in the pot, Emma said, entering from outside in worn jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up. You'll need it, and you might want to change into something less. She waved her hand at his designer casual. Wear, expensive. 30 minutes later, Xander stood in the corral wearing the only pair of jeans he owned, purchased by his stylist for a casual CEO photo shoot, and work boots that Emma's father had lent him. They pinched his feet, but he refused to complain. First lesson, Emma said, leaning against the fence. Horses are prey animals. They read energy. Your energy right now is screaming, Manhattan boardroom. And what should it be screaming? Xander asked, trying not to sound defensive. Nothing. It shouldn't be screaming at all. She demonstrated by taking a deep breath, relaxing her shoulders, and softening her gaze. Horses want quiet confidence, not aggressive dominance. Xander attempted to mimic her posture, feeling ridiculous. "Now approach slowly," Emma instructed as a gentle brown mare was led into the corral. "No sudden movements. She's not a business rival you're trying to intimidate." "I don't intimidate business rivals," Xander protested. Then, seeing Emma's raised eyebrow, admitted, "I have people who do that for me." A laugh escaped Emma's lips, a genuine sound that caught them both by surprise. Something in Xander's chest tightened at the sound. For the next 3 hours, Emma put him through basic horse handling exercises. By midday, Xander's back ached, his hands were blistered, and his ego was thoroughly bruised. Yet somehow, he'd managed to lead the mare in a circle without incident. "Not terrible," Emma conceded during their water break. "For a city slicker, high praise indeed," Xander replied dryly, but he couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt. The mare, Buttercup, embarrassingly named by Lily years ago, had actually responded to his commands. "When do I work with Midnight Thunder?" he asked, eyes drifting to the separate paddock where his prized stallion grazed alone. "When you're ready," Emma said firmly, "which isn't today or tomorrow." "I didn't become successful by taking baby steps," Xander countered. Emma stepped closer, close, enough that he could see the golden flecks in her green eyes. "This isn't the tech world, Mr. Morgan. You can't fail fast and pivot with horses. Mistakes get people hurt or killed." The intensity in her voice made him pause. There was a story there, but before he could ask, Jim Sullivan approached with the mail. "Phone bill, electric bill," the older man murmured, then held up an official-looking envelope. "And another notice from the bank." Emma's face tightened as she took the envelope and tucked it into her back pocket without opening it. "Thanks, Dad." The exchange wasn't lost on Xander. He'd built his fortune by reading people in situations, and the Sullivans were clearly in financial trouble. "Why not take my money?" he asked bluntly when Jim had wandered back to the house. "Pride won't pay your bills." Emma's eyes flashed. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." She studied him for a moment, then sighed. "This land has been in my family for 5 generations. My great-great-grandfather built that house by hand. We've weathered wars, depressions, and droughts without selling out. I won't be the Sullivan who loses it because I took the easy way." Her words hung in the air between them, and Xander found himself unexpectedly moved. In his world, everything had a price. Family legacies were discussed in terms of stock portfolios, not land and labor. "I respect that," he said simply. Emma looked surprised, as if she'd expected mockery. The moment stretched, something unspoken passing between them. It was broken by Lily running up to the fence, her small boots kicking up dust. "Aunt Emma! Midnight's doing the thing again!" They both turned to see the black stallion pacing his paddock, nostrils flared, eyes wild. "He does this every afternoon," Emma explained, already moving. "He needs to run. Really run, not just circle a paddock." Without waiting for permission, she entered Midnight Thunder's enclosure. The stallion's ears pricked forward at her approach. Xander held his breath, but instead of aggression, the horse displayed keen interest. With movements that seemed impossibly fluid, Emma slipped a halter onto the stallion's head. "I'm taking him out to the north pasture," she called over her shoulder. "It has a proper galloping stretch." "I'm coming with you," Xander replied, already climbing through the fence rails. Emma looked like she wanted to object, but instead handed him a lead rope attached to Buttercup's halter. "Keep up if you can, city boy." As they walked the horses through sun-dappled woods toward the pasture, Xander found himself studying Emma's profile. The determination in her jaw, the gentleness in her hands as she guided the powerful stallion, the easy confidence in her stride. "You were born for this," he observed. "For what?" "This life, this connection with animals, He gestured to the way Midnight Thunder matched his steps perfectly to hers. "It's in your blood." Emma glanced at him, a question in her eyes. "And what were you born for, Alexander Morgan, besides making money?" The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him something so fundamental in years, perhaps ever. Before he could form an answer, they emerged into a stunning vista, a wide, sloping pasture bordered by mountains that glowed purple in the afternoon light. Emma removed Midnight's halter and stepped back. The stallion stood motionless for a moment, as if savoring his freedom, then exploded into motion. His powerful body stretched into a full gallop, mane and tail streaming behind him like black fire. The sight was breathtaking. "That," Xander said quietly, answering her earlier question. "I was born to create something that magnificent." When piking and he turned, he found Emma watching him, not the horse. Something had shifted in her gaze, a softening, an evaluation being recalculated. "Maybe there's hope for you yet, billionaire," she said. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting the pasture in golden light, Xander Morgan, who prided himself on being in control of every situation, realized with both alarm and exhilaration that here, on this farm, with this woman, he was entirely out of his depth. And strangely, he didn't mind at all. 2 weeks into his stay at Sullivan Ranch, Alexander Morgan was almost unrecognizable. His designer stubble had grown into the beginnings of a proper beard. His hands, once manicured for boardroom tables, now bore calluses from rope work and mucking out stalls. And most shocking of all, he'd willingly left his phone in his room for entire mornings. "You're not completely hopeless," Emma admitted one evening, as they sat on the porch, watching fireflies blink in the gathering twilight. A mason jar of local moonshine, medicinal purposes only, Jim had insisted, sat between them. "Such effusive praise," Xander replied, raising his glass in mock toast. "What prompted this outburst of approval?" "Buttercup actually looks for you now," Emma said, the corner of her mouth lifting. "She recognizes your footsteps." Something warmed in Xander's chest that had nothing to do with the moonshine. "What about Midnight Thunder? When do I get my shot with him?" Emma considered him in the fading light. "Tomorrow," she decided. "But just groundwork. No riding." Xander nodded, trying to contain his excitement. 2 weeks ago, he would have demanded more, faster. Now he understood the value of patience, at least with horses. "You never told me how you ended up with horses," he said, changing the subject. "Was it always the plan?" Emma tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture he'd come to recognize as her thinking tell. "I actually went to college for business. I was engaged to a man who worked in finance. I thought I'd wear power suits and live in the city." Xander raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" "Life," she said simply. "Dad got sick. Mom passed away. The ranch started struggling. And my fiancé?" She trailed off, then gave a small, humorless laugh. "Let's just say he wasn't interested in a woman whose new accessory was a pair of mucking boots instead of a designer handbag." Xander felt an unexpected surge of anger toward this unknown man. "His loss," he said quietly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air seemed charged with something neither was ready to name. Emma quickly stood up. "Early morning tomorrow. We should get some sleep." "Emma," Xander called as she reached the door. "Thank you for giving me a chance with Midnight." She paused, her silhouette framed in the warm light from inside. "Don't make me regret it, city boy." Morning arrived with a soft summer rain that turned the world misty and dreamlike. By the time Xander reached the barn, Emma was already there, brushing Midnight Thunder's gleaming coat. The stallion's ears flicked toward Xander but showed none of the aggression from their first encounter. "He remembers you," Emma said, not looking up from her work. Is that good or bad? Depends on what you do next. She handed him the brush. Your turn. Xander approached slowly, using all the techniques Emma had taught him about projecting calm energy. Midnight Thunder watched him with intelligent eyes, but remained still as Xander carefully began brushing his shoulder. That's it, Emma encouraged. Softly. He's giving you a chance. Don't waste it. For the next hour, Xander worked with the stallion under Emma's guidance. They progressed to leading exercises, with Midnight responding to Xander's commands with increasing willingness. He's testing you less, Emma observed. He's starting to trust you. Or he's biding his time before he tramples me, Xander joked, though his chest swelled with pride. Emma rolled her eyes. Always the optimist. The day progressed well until mid-afternoon when Charlotte called on the satellite phone. Xander took the call outside the barn, but Emma could hear his voice rising as he paced. What do you mean Jenkins approved a new rider? I explicitly said no one rides Thunder except... He paused, listening. Well, uninvite him. I don't care if he's the ghost of Secretariat. When he returned, his jaw was tight, his body radiating the aggressive energy Emma had worked so hard to help him control. Problem at the office? She asked carefully. My stable manager took it upon himself to schedule a champion jockey to work with Midnight next week. Apparently, the board is getting nervous about our Kentucky Derby prospects. Emma's face remained neutral. Well, that is why you bought him, isn't it? To win races. Yes, but... Xander stopped, unable to articulate the change that had occurred within him. The Derby suddenly seemed less important than understanding this magnificent animal, than earning his trust. Midnight Thunder, sensing the shift in atmosphere, began pacing nervously. You need to calm down, Emma warned. He's picking up on your energy. Xander tried to relax, but the corporate crisis had triggered his old patterns. I need to make some calls, he said abruptly, turning to leave. Xander, wait. But he was already striding away, pulling out his phone. For the next 2 days, Xander was constantly on calls, his attention divided. Emma watched as the progress they'd made slipped away. Midnight Thunder grew more agitated, and even gentle Buttercup seemed to sense the tension. On the third morning, Emma found Xander in the stable at dawn, attempting to saddle Midnight Thunder. What are you doing? She demanded, rushing forward. I need to show progress, Xander said, his voice tight. The board is threatening to sell him if he can't be ridden by next week. So, you thought you'd just climb on a half-ton animal with a mind of his own without proper preparation? Emma placed herself between him and the horse. That's how people get killed, Alexander. I know what I'm doing, he insisted, though they both knew he didn't. No, you don't. And right now, you don't know who you are either. Emma's voice was low but intense. The man who's been here for the past 2 weeks wouldn't risk this horse's trust, or his own neck, for some arbitrary corporate deadline. Their faces were inches apart, both breathing hard. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Xander said. And you don't understand what you're throwing away, Emma countered. She gestured to Midnight Thunder, who watched them with alert, wary eyes. He was beginning to trust you. Really trust you. Do you know how rare that is? Something in her words cut through Xander's corporate armor. Was she still talking about the horse? Before he could respond, the barn door opened, and Beth appeared. Emma, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from the bank. Emma's face paled slightly. I'll be right there. As she turned to leave, she added over her shoulder, Don't do anything stupid while I'm gone, billionaire. Left alone, with the stallion, Xander felt the weight of his competing worlds pressing down on him. The board wanted results. His shareholders wanted profits. His ego wanted victory. But for the first time in his driven life, those wants felt hollow, compared to the simple desire to be worthy of a horse's trust, and perhaps a woman's respect. He carefully removed the saddle from Midnight Thunder's back and returned it to the rack. "Sorry, buddy," he murmured, stroking the horse's neck. "I almost messed up there." By the time Emma returned from her meeting, her face was tight with worry, but she stopped short seeing Xander sitting on a hay bale, simply watching Midnight Thunder graze in his paddock. "You didn't ride him," she observed. "You were right," Xander admitted, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "I was being an idiot." A small smile tugged at Emma's lips. "Well, admitting you're an idiot is the first step to not being one." He patted the hay bale beside him, and after a moment's hesitation, she sat down. They watched the stallion in companionable silence. "Everything okay? With the bank?" Xander finally asked. Emma sighed. "Not really. We have 3 months to come, up with the balloon payment, or we lose the ranch." Xander started to speak, but Emma held up a hand. "Don't offer to write a check. Please." "Why not? It would solve your problem." "Because then I'd just be another person who needed Alexander Morgan's money to save them." She looked directly into his eyes. "And that's not who I want to be to you." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to face. That night, unable to sleep, Xander found himself wandering to the barn. To his surprise, soft music was playing, and Emma was there, sitting on a stool before Midnight Thunder's stall, reading aloud from a worn paperback novel. She looked up as Xander approached, but didn't stop reading. The stallion's head hung over the stall door, his eyes half closed in contentment. "This is how I gain their trust," she explained during a page turn. "Time, patience, consistency." "Does it work on billionaires too?" Xander asked, settling onto a nearby hay bale. Emma's eyes sparkled in the dim barn light. "I don't know. I've never tried to tame one before." As she continued reading, her voice soft in the quiet night, Xander realized with crystal clarity that for the first time in his adult life, he wasn't thinking about business, success, or his next acquisition. He was simply present, in a barn that smelled of hay and horses, listening to a woman read poetry to a stallion, and feeling more content than he had in years. When he caught himself watching the way Emma's lips formed the words, rather than listening to their meaning, Xander knew he was in dangerous territory indeed. "You're kidding me," Emma said, staring at the paper in her hands. "This can't be right." It was week 5 of Xander's stay at Sullivan Ranch, and they stood in the driveway as a courier handed over a certified envelope. "What is it?" Xander asked, leading Buttercup back to her paddock after their morning ride. Emma's hands trembled slightly. "It's a notice about the mortgage. The bank says it's been paid in full." Xander busied himself with the paddock latch, avoiding her eyes. "Interesting." "Alexander." Her voice was dangerously quiet. "Did you pay off our mortgage?" He finally turned to face her, crossing his arms defensively. "Technically, Morgan Equestrian Enterprises purchased a controlling interest in a small, rural bank that happened to hold a certain mortgage on a certain horse farm. You bought the bank?" Emma's voice rose in disbelief. "I diversified my portfolio," he corrected, attempting nonchalance. "The mortgage paperwork was simply streamlined." Emma's face flushed with anger. "I told you I didn't want your money." "You didn't take my money," Xander argued. "I made a business decision that had a positive ancillary effect on your situation." "Don't lawyer speak me," Emma snapped. "You went behind my back. To save your family's legacy." Xander's own temper flared. "Would you rather lose the ranch to prove a point about your independence?" They stood toe-to-toe now, both breathing hard. "You don't get it, do you?" Emma said, her voice dropping. "This wasn't your problem to solve. Now I'm just another item on the list of things Alexander Morgan acquired because he could." The accusation hit him like a physical blow. "Is that what you think? That I see you as an acquisition?" Something flickered across Emma's face. Vulnerability quickly masked by determination. I think you're used to fixing problems by throwing money at them. But some things can't be bought, Alexander. With that, she turned and strode toward the stable, her back rigid with hurt pride. Emma, wait! Xander called, but she didn't turn around. Inside the stable, Emma found Midnight Thunder watching her with his intelligent eyes. Men, she muttered, grabbing a brush and attacking the stallion's already gleaming coat. Billionaires in particular. Talking to horses now? Jim Sullivan's voice came from behind her. Her father leaned on his cane in the stable doorway, his weathered face creased with concern. Better conversationalists than certain humans, Emma replied tersely. Jim settled onto a hay bale with a grunt. I heard about the mortgage. Emma's brushstrokes became more vigorous. Can you believe him? After I specifically told him that you didn't want his help, Jim finished. Yes, I heard that part too, several times. And I'm wondering why you're so determined to refuse a gift that saves the home your mother loved, that your grandparents built, that your niece will inherit someday. Emma's hand stilled. It's not that simple, Dad. Isn't it? Jim's eyes were kind but firm. Pride is a luxury, Emmy, one we can't afford. It's not just pride, Emma protested. It's complicated. Jim chuckled. Because you have feelings for him. I do not, Emma objected too quickly. The lady doth protest too much, Jim quoted with a knowing smile. I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching. Emma buried her face in Midnight Thunder's mane, grateful the horse couldn't betray her blush. He's leaving. In a week, she said quietly. Back to his real life of boardrooms and billions. This was just an adventure for him, a diversion. Is that what you think? Jim asked. Because the man I've watched these past weeks doesn't look like someone playing at farming. He looks like someone finding himself. Before Emma could respond, Beth burst into the stable, her face flushed with excitement. You're not going to believe this. There's a camera crew setting up by the north pasture, and a news van. What? Emma and Jim exclaimed in unison. Something about a press conference, Beth continued breathlessly. Lily's already up there with her little cowgirl outfit on, charming the reporters. Emma's stomach dropped. Of course, Xander had gotten what he came for. Good publicity about his horse whisperer project. Now he was ready for the big reveal before heading back to New York. Despite the summer heat, she felt suddenly cold. By the time she reached the north pasture, a small crowd had gathered. Local folks mixed with professional-looking strangers with cameras and microphones. And standing at the center, looking more like the Alexander Morgan from magazine covers than the Xander she'd come to know, was the billionaire himself. He'd shaved his beard and changed into a crisp button-down shirt, though he'd kept the jeans and boots. Beside him stood Charlotte, his assistant, tablet in hand, directing the setup with practiced efficiency. Ah, here she is, Xander called as he spotted Emma. The cameras swung toward her, and she froze like a deer in headlights. Ms. Sullivan, would you join me, please? His voice was smooth, professional, the voice of CEO Alexander Morgan, not the Xander who had sat with her on the porch, sharing moonshine and stories. Numbly, Emma walked forward, acutely aware of her work clothes and messy ponytail. Ladies and gentlemen, Xander addressed the gathering. Thank you for coming on such short notice. As many of you know, Morgan Equestrian Enterprises purchased Midnight Thunder with the intention of racing him at the Kentucky Derby. He paused, his eyes finding Emma's. Something in his expression softened momentarily before he continued. Today, I'm announcing a change in plans. Instead of racing, Midnight Thunder will be the foundation stallion for a new therapeutic riding program. Murmurs swept through the crowd. Emma blinked in confusion. The Sullivan Ranch Equine Therapy Center, Xander continued, will provide Services to veterans and children with special needs, free of charge. The Morgan Foundation will fund the construction of state-of-the-art facilities here on land that will remain 100% owned and operated by the Sullivan family. Emma's mouth fell open. This was not at all what she had expected. Ms. Sullivan's remarkable gift with troubled horses, Xander went on, deserves to be shared with those who need healing most. Her methods will be the cornerstone of our approach. He turned to her directly now. Emma, would you like to say a few words? She stepped forward on unsteady legs, mind racing. This is unexpected, she managed, glancing between Xander and the crowd. But horses have always been healers in my life. If we can extend that gift to others, especially those who've served our country. Her voice strengthened as she continued, vision and passion overtaking her shock. Then this is exactly the future I would choose for Midnight Thunder, and for Sullivan Ranch. The press conference continued with questions about logistics and timelines, but Emma barely heard them. Her eyes kept returning to Xander, trying to reconcile this grand gesture with the man she thought she knew. As the crowd dispersed and the cameras were packed away, Emma finally cornered Xander by the old oak tree, where they'd often sat watching Midnight Thunder run. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded without preamble. Xander's corporate mask slipped, revealing the uncertainty beneath. "I was afraid you'd say no, that your pride would—" "Not the therapy center," Emma interrupted. "Though we will definitely discuss that later. I meant, why didn't you tell me you were leaving? This feels like a farewell gift." Xander looked genuinely surprised. "Leaving? Who said anything about leaving?" "The 6 weeks are almost up," Emma reminded him. "Your board wants results. Your company needs its CEO." "My company has run perfectly well with me working remotely," Xander countered. "As for the board, they're thrilled with the PR benefits of the therapy center. And the 6 weeks..." He took a step closer. "That was for Midnight Thunder's training. Your job with him is complete." "So what are you saying?" Emma asked, heart beating wildly despite her efforts to remain calm. "I'm saying," Xander replied, lowering his voice, "that perhaps it's time we discussed my training. I think I still have a lot to learn." "About horses?" Emma asked, even though she knew that wasn't what he meant. Xander reached out slowly, as she'd taught him to approach a skittish horse, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "About everything that matters." The touch sent electricity through her, but Emma still hesitated. "What happens when you get bored with playing farmer? When you miss your penthouse and private jets?" "I won't lie to you," Xander said seriously. "I can't promise I'll never want to see New York again, or that I won't need to handle business in person sometimes." Emma started to pull away, but he gently caught her hand. "But I can promise you this," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "For the first time in my life, I've found someone, who makes me feel alive in a way that all my success never did. I'm not ready to walk away from that. Not now. Maybe not ever." Emma's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. "So what are you proposing, billionaire?" A slow smile spread across Xander's face. Not his CEO smile, but the real one she'd come to treasure. "I believe the traditional approach involves dinner first. Tomorrow night, I hear there's a decent steakhouse in town." Despite herself, Emma laughed. "A decent steakhouse? Your standards have really fallen, Mr. Morgan." "On the contrary, Ms. Sullivan," he replied, his voice dropping to a whisper as he leaned closer. "They've never been higher." As the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Emma Sullivan, who'd sworn never to fall for another man in a suit, found herself standing on tiptoe to meet Alexander Morgan halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, like the first touch between human and horse. Their second was not. From his paddock, Midnight Thunder watched them with what could only be described as equine satisfaction. His job, it seemed, was complete. 1 year later. "I still can't believe you're making me wear this," Xander grumbled, adjusting the bow tie that felt like it was strangling him. "Hush," Emma replied, straightening his lapels with practiced hands. It's not every day the Sullivan Ranch Equine Therapy Center hosts its grand opening gala. They stood in what had once been the Sullivan family's modest living room, but was now transformed into Xander's home office. A perfect blend of rustic charm and high-tech functionality. Outside, through the window, white tents gleamed in the evening sun, covering the newly constructed therapy facilities. "Besides," Emma continued, "you wore suits every day for 20 years. One more night won't kill you." "Those suits never had bow ties," Xander protested, but his eyes were soft as they traced Emma's face. She was dressed in an elegant emerald gown that matched her eyes, her auburn hair swept into an intricate updo. "You look beautiful." Emma blushed, still not entirely comfortable with compliments after a year together. "You clean up pretty well yourself, billionaire." The past 12 months had transformed both the Sullivan Ranch and their lives. The Therapeutic Writing Center had risen from architects' drawings to reality, with state-of-the-art facilities designed to serve veterans with PTSD and children with disabilities. The first programs would begin next week. More remarkably, Alexander Morgan had become a fixture in the small Virginia community. He still flew to New York monthly for board meetings, but otherwise ran Morgan Tech remotely, having discovered that he preferred fresh air to air conditioning and starlit nights to city lights. As for the Sullivan family, they had insisted on remaining working partners rather than charity cases. Jim Sullivan had surprised everyone with his talent for program development, creating a curriculum that combined traditional horsemanship with modern therapeutic techniques. Beth had taken over administration, proving she had inherited her sister's head for business. And Emma had found herself not only training horses, but also training people to connect with them. Her methods had drawn attention from equine therapists across the country, and a book deal was in the works. "Ready to face your adoring public?" Emma asked, offering her arm. Xander took it, his thumb brushing over the simple diamond engagement ring on her finger, still new enough that she sometimes found herself staring at it in wonder. "As long as you're beside me." The gala was in full swing when they stepped outside. 200 guests mingled under twinkling lights, a mix of local ranchers in their Sunday best, veterans advocates, corporate sponsors, and yes, a few celebrities. Xander had convinced to lend their star power to the cause. "There's our star," Beth called, ushering forward a smiling Lily in a frilly dress, leading a perfectly groomed Buttercup bedecked with flowers. "Looking very professional, Miss Lily," Xander said with a formal bow that made the little girl giggle. "I'm going to be a horse therapist like Aunt Emma when I grow up," Lily announced. "Or a billionaire like Uncle Xander." "Why choose?" Emma laughed, smoothing her niece's hair. "Your uncle has taught us all that you can reinvent yourself anytime you want." Xander caught her eye over Lily's head, a private moment of understanding, passing between them. They had both reinvented themselves in ways neither could have imagined a year ago. The evening progressed with speeches and champagne toasts. Community leaders praised the economic benefit to the region. Medical professionals spoke about the proven benefits of equine therapy. Veterans shared moving testimonials about how horses had helped them reconnect with themselves after trauma. Finally, it was Xander's turn to address the crowd. As he took the microphone, Emma watched with pride. Gone was the arrogant CEO who had stormed into her life demanding results. In his place stood a man who had learned to listen, to horses, to people, and to his own heart. "A year ago," Xander began, "I came to Sullivan Ranch with one goal, to turn an unrideable horse into a Kentucky Derby champion. I thought I was the one in control of that story." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "I could not have been more wrong." He found Emma in the audience, his gaze settling on her with a warmth that still made her knees weak. "What I discovered here was something no amount of money could buy. Authentic connection, with a remarkable horse. He gestured toward the paddock where Midnight Thunder grazed peacefully, with a community that values character over credit limits, approving nods from the locals, and with a woman who saw past my bank account to the man I could become. Emma blinked back unexpected tears as whispers and knowing glances circulated among the guests. The Sullivan Ranch Equine Therapy Center stands for a simple truth, Xander continued, that healing happens when we strip away pretense and connect heart to heart. Whether you're a corporate executive, he touched his own chest, a wounded warrior, or a child facing challenges, there's something magical about the bond between humans and horses. A round of applause followed his words. As it died down, Xander cleared his throat, suddenly looking slightly nervous, an expression Emma rarely saw on his face anymore. And since we're celebrating new beginnings tonight, he said, I'd like to invite Emma Sullivan to join me up here. Confused but curious, Emma made her way through the crowd. Whispers followed her, including Beth's not-so-subtle, "Oh my God, is he going to—" before Jim shushed her. "What are you doing?" Emma whispered as she reached Xander's side. Instead of answering, he took her hand and turned back to the microphone. Many of you know that Emma and I became engaged last month. More applause, along with a few good-natured whoops from the local ranchers who'd watched their relationship unfold. What you don't know, Xander continued, is that we've been arguing ever since about what kind of wedding to have. Emma's eyes widened. This was not what she'd expected. I wanted to fly everyone to a villa in Tuscany, Xander explained to the crowd. Emma thought that was ridiculous. It is ridiculous, she confirmed into the microphone, drawing laughs. Emma wanted a simple ceremony at the courthouse, Xander continued. I thought that was equally ridiculous. More laughter. So we've reached a compromise, Xander said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Emma Sullivan, would you do me the honor of marrying me right here, right now, surrounded by the people and horses we love? A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by delighted murmurs. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Now? But we don't have... A minister? Xander finished for her. Judge Phillips is right there. He pointed to the county judge, who waved cheerfully. A dress? You're wearing one, and it matches your eyes perfectly. Rings? I have them in my pocket. Family? They're all here. Emma looked around at the smiling faces of her father, sister, and niece, none of whom seemed surprised by this turn of events. You knew about this? She accused Jim, who just smiled innocently. Your dad's been keeping this secret for 2 weeks, Xander admitted. So, what do you say, Emma? Ready to tame this billionaire once and for all? The crowd held its collective breath as Emma pretended to consider. In truth, her heart had already decided. Well, she said slowly, savoring the moment, I suppose it would be a shame to waste a perfectly good bow tie. Cheers erupted as Xander swept her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of surprises. The impromptu wedding ceremony that followed was everything neither of them had known they wanted. Simple yet meaningful. Traditional yet uniquely theirs. Judge Phillips officiated with good humor. Jim Sullivan gave his daughter away with tears in his eyes, and little Lily scattered rose, petals with theatrical flair. When it came time for the vows, Xander spoke of learning patience, of finding value beyond balance sheets, of the courage it took to be vulnerable. Emma spoke of opening her heart again, of trusting not just Xander but herself, of building something new while honoring tradition. As they exchanged rings under the Virginia stars, Midnight Thunder and Buttercup watched from their nearby paddock, almost as if bearing witness to the union their unlikely friendship had created. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Judge Phillips declared. You may kiss the bride, again, he added with a wink. This time their kiss was not just a promise but a covenant, sealed with laughter and applause. Later, As they danced under the stars to a local band's country rendition of classic love songs, Emma rested her head against Xander's chest. "Happy?" he murmured into her hair. She replied. "Though I'm still not sure how I ended up married to a billionaire. I swore I'd never fall for another man in a suit." Xander chuckled. "Technically, you fell for me when I was in mucking boots and covered in hay." "True," Emma conceded. "What about you? Ever regret trading Manhattan for manure?" Xander dipped her dramatically, making her laugh. "Not for a second." Drawing her back up, he added more seriously, "You know, when I came here I thought winning was everything. Now I know it's not about winning or losing. It's about running the race that's truly yours." As if on cue, a soft nickering drew their attention to the paddock where Midnight Thunder stood at the fence, watching them with intelligent eyes. "I think someone wants to congratulate us," Emma said. Hand in hand, they slipped away from the reception to where the magnificent stallion waited. In the years since Emma had first calmed him on that rainy day, he had become not a racehorse but something more valuable. A healer, a teacher, a bridge between broken souls and recovery. "Hello, old friend," Xander said softly, stroking the stallion's velvety nose. "We wouldn't be here without you." Midnight Thunder snorted, as if to say the feeling was mutual. Emma leaned against Xander's shoulder, taking in the scene, the celebration behind them, the man beside her, the horse before them, and the star-filled sky above. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "for a girl who never wanted complications, and a man who always needed control, we've managed to create quite a beautiful mess together." Xander turned to her, framing her face with his hands. In his eyes, Emma could see not just love, but partnership, respect, and the journey they'd traveled from strangers to soulmates. "The best kind of mess," he agreed. "The kind that feels exactly like home." As they sealed this truth with a kiss, Midnight Thunder tossed his magnificent head and galloped off across the moonlit pasture, wild and free, yet always knowing exactly where he belonged.